My name is Ebony Zimmerman. Tonight was my 36th birthday party. 40 guests in our Buckhead mansion, crystal glasses live jazz the whole show. Halfway through dessert, my father stood up, wine glass swaying in his hand, and announced loud enough for the entire room to hear, "You're not even half the woman your 16-year-old sister is." My mother smirked and added, "Seriously, Ebony, be grateful we still let you live here." Serenity, legs crossed on the velvet sofa, flashed her new Rolex and laughed. "Exactly. Some of us actually deserve the lifestyle." The room went dead silent. 40 pairs of eyes on me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just pushed my chair back slow enough for the legs to scrape across the marble floor and smiled. "Then let her start paying your salary," I said, looking straight at my father. "Because, Dad, you're fired. Effective tonight." His glass stopped halfway to his lips. My mother's mouth actually fell open. Serenity blinked like someone had slapped her. You could have heard a champagne cork drop. If you've ever had family treat you like you're disposable the second a younger, shinier version comes along, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Have you ever smiled while planning the perfect revenge? Let me know, because the rest of this story is going to hit hard. I was 18 when Dad sat me down in his study and slid an envelope across the desk. Inside was the full-ride scholarship letter from Emory I'd fought 2 years to earn. He didn't even look up from his laptop. "We're keeping this money," he said. "Your mother and I might have another child someday. That one will need it more." I remember staring at the paper until the words blurred. I didn't argue. I just nodded, walked out and applied for every student loan I could find. 4 years later, I graduated top of my real estate finance class. I came home with a business plan and asked my parents to co-sign so Zimmerman Realty Group could be incorporated under my name. Mom laughed first. Dad didn't bother hiding his smirk. "Sweetheart," he said, "this is a legacy business. Daughters don't run legacies. When we have a son, or at least someone worthy, we'll talk." They refused to put the family name on anything that belonged to me. So I took the train to Atlanta with 2 suitcases and $23,000 in debt, rented a studio the size of a closet in Midtown, and started the company anyway. I cold-called brokers, flipped my first strip mall lease before my 24th birthday, and never asked them for a single cent again. 10 years in Zimmerman Realty Group was managing over 230 commercial properties across the Southeast. Market value had crossed $180 million. The board begged me to take the chairman. Dad still sat on every investor call wearing the chairman title like it was his birthright. On paper, I was CEO, but every major decision still needed his signature. He loved reminding everyone that the company carried his last name, not mine. I smiled in meetings signed where I was told and quietly moved every new asset into holding companies he didn't know existed. Then 14 months ago, I did something nobody saw coming. I walked into his home office on a random Tuesday with a bottle of his favorite Macallan and a thick contract folder. "Dad," I said, "you've been talking about retiring for years. Let me make it official." I offered him the title, Chairman Emeritus, $750,000 a year, full medical. The corner office with the skyline view, everything a man stepping back could want. Mom clapped like I'd finally come to my senses. He flipped to the last page, scrawled his signature without reading past the salary line, and shook my hand like he'd just won a prize. They toasted to my generosity that night. I raised my glass with them and felt absolutely nothing. I signed that contract for one reason only. Garrett Stone has been my corporate attorney since the day I signed the very first lease in that cramped Midtown studio. He knows every shell company, every holding structure, every line I've ever drawn to protect what I built. Late one Thursday night, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. His name flashed on the screen. "Ebony," he said the second I picked up, voice low, "your father just emailed me from his company address. He wants me to draft a new irrevocable trust. Everything, the operating agreements, the real estate holdings, the cash reserves, all of it rolls to Serenity when she turns 18. Your name isn't mentioned once, not even as a contingent beneficiary. I sat up in bed, switched on the lamp, and opened my laptop. Garrett had already forwarded the message. Dad's signature block still read, Clyde Zimmerman, Chairman Emeritus Zimmerman Realty Group. The instructions were crystal clear. Lock me out completely. Make the transfer look like estate planning and do it fast. I read the email 3 times. No rage, no tears. Just the coldest clarity I've ever felt. Does he know you're my counsel first? I asked. He thinks loyalty is still for sale. Garrett answered. He offered a $50,000 bonus to have the documents ready in 2 weeks. I leaned back against the headboard and stared at the ceiling. Tell him yes, I said. Tell him you'll start immediately. Then bill every minute to the company because from now on every cent he spends is on my tab. Garrett paused. You're sure positive? And Garrett. From this second forward, you work for me and only me. Double your retainer if you need to. I want a mirror plan. Something he'll never see coming. He exhaled slowly. Understood. I hung up, poured myself a glass of water, and opened a new encrypted folder on my desktop titled Endgame. That night, I didn't sleep. I mapped every asset, every entity, every signature authority still floating in Dad's name. By sunrise, I had a list of 47 moves that needed to happen in perfect silence. First thing the next morning, I called an emergency board session, no parents invited, and voted myself sole managing member of the parent LLC. The resolution passed unanimously. Dad had missed the last 4 meetings anyway. Next, I created the Ebony Zimmerman Irrevocable Trust in Delaware, appointed Garrett and 2 independent trustees he trusted, and began quietly transferring ownership of every new lease and every refinancing into the trust's name. Old assets stayed where they were for now. I needed the illusion to remain intact. I kept the corporate credit cards active. I left Dad's name on the country club membership and the season tickets. I even approved Mom's request for a new Range Rover for errands. Every swipe, every wire, every signature went straight into a shadow ledger Garrett built for me. Serenity, meanwhile, started posting from private jets and 5-star resorts she thought were birthday surprises. I watched the charges hit the corporate Amex and simply forwarded them to the forensic accountant I'd hired 6 weeks earlier. He flagged each one personal expenses disguised as client entertainment. The total climbed past $4 million faster than I expected. I scheduled quarterly strategy retreats in Miami, and Napa flew the executive team first class and made sure Dad heard how generous his daughter had become in his semi-retirement. He ate it up, called me finally acting like family in front of the staff. I smiled, refilled his glass, and signed another approval for Serenity's new condo deposit in Buckhead. Garrett sent Dad drafts of the fake trust every 10 days, each version more ironclad than the last. Dad replied with enthusiastic notes. Perfect. Add a spendthrift clause for Serenity. We don't want her blowing it too fast. Every email went into the same encrypted folder. By the 8th month, the real trust owned 92% of the operating entities. Dad still believed he controlled everything because the signage hadn't changed, and the checks still carried his name. He had no idea the checks were now drawn on accounts I alone could freeze. I filed the first IRS whistleblower submission anonymously through Garrett's firm, attaching 2 years of flag transactions and the corporate card statements. The reward if they collected would be substantial. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the liens. From that day forward, I started moving the pieces exactly where I wanted them. The Ebony Zimmerman Irrevocable Trust was born in a quiet Wilmington law office on a Tuesday. No one in Atlanta ever noticed. 3 independent trustees signed. Garrett filed the paperwork before lunch. From that day forward, every new lease, every refinance, every acquisition flowed straight into the trust. The old entities stayed untouched on the surface. The stationery, the signage, the bank portals all still showed Zimmerman Realty Group exactly as Dad liked it. Underneath, ownership had already begun its silent migration. I kept every corporate card active and every account threshold high. Dad used the black Amex the way he always had, never questioning why the statement stopped coming to his inbox. Mom requested wire transfers for household expenses the way she had for 20 years. I approved them instantly, then mirrored every transaction into the forensic ledger. The internal audit ran on a server no one else could access. Each week, a new report landed in my inbox. By the end of the fourth month, the number sat at $2,800,000 moved for Serenity alone. Private high school tuition in Switzerland billed as employee training. A $2 million condo in Midtown titled directly to a 16-year-old listed as marketing internship housing. First-class deposit for a 3-week summer tour across Europe coded as client site visits. Every line item carried Dad's digital approval or Mom's handwritten note. I printed nothing. I forwarded nothing. I simply let the total climb. Garrett scheduled quarterly trust reviews in person, always at my penthouse, after 9 at night. We sat at the kitchen island with 2 laptops and a bottle of water between us. He showed me the new percentages: 42.58, 71.89. Each meeting ended the same way: one more batch of operating agreements re-registered under the trust, one more layer of distance between what my parents thought they controlled and what actually belonged to me. I started requiring 2 signatures on every check over $50,000, mine and Dad's. He loved seeing his name still mattered. He signed without reading the memos. The memos, of course, now reference the trust as payee. Serenity posted constantly: private jet selfies from Teterboro, shopping bags on Rue du Rhône, a caption that read, "Living my best life before college even starts." I saved every story, every tag, every geotag. The accountant matched the timestamps to the corporate charges within minutes. Dad scheduled a family legacy dinner and bragged to cousins about the European trust he was finalizing. I smiled across the table, complimented the wine, and later that night moved another 11 properties into the trust while they slept. By month 6, the forensic total crossed $4.2 million. Garrett walked into my office carrying a single USB drive. "Enough for felony misappropriation," he said. I took the drive, plugged it into the isolated laptop, and submitted the Form 211 whistleblower package to the IRS before midnight. No name, no return address, just 47 pages of bank records, card statements, and board minutes showing who authorized what. The IRS acknowledgement came back in 9 days. Case number assigned. Investigation opened. I closed the email and scheduled the birthday venue. I booked the same ballroom Dad used for his 60th. Same caterer, same string quartet. I sent the invitations myself, handwritten notes on heavy cream stock. "Please help me celebrate 36 years and the next chapter of Zimmerman Realty Group." Dad called to say he was touched. Mom asked if she could bring the new Rolex she'd bought for Serenity as a table gift. I told them, of course. Garrett installed a ceiling-mounted projector disguised as a chandelier fixture 3 days before the party. Mrs. Blanca Aguirre, our housekeeper of 23 years, received her own invitation and a quiet request to sit near the front. She looked me in the eye and nodded once. She already knew. Every seat was assigned. Every slide was timed. Every document was triple-checked. And I chose my 36th birthday to end it all. The ballroom looked perfect. Gold, uplighting white orchids everywhere, the string quartet playing soft jazz covers. 40 guests in black tie milled around high tops, laughing over old deals and new babies. Dad had already knocked back 3 bourbons and was working on a 4th. Mom floated from table to table in a champagne silk gown, diamond earrings flashing every time she turned her head. Serenity stood in the center of her usual orbit of second cousins and country club friends, phone raised high, showing off photos on the huge screen I'd rented for the slideshow of my life. "Look," she announced loud enough for half the room to hear. "This is the condo Daddy closed on last week. Midtown 32nd floor, all mine when I turn 18. She swiped. And these are the business class tickets for July. Paris, Rome, Amalfi. Mom says I deserve it after finals. Polite laughter rippled. Someone toasted to the next generation. Dad slung an arm around Serenity's shoulders, cheeks flushed, voice carrying over the music. That's right, he boomed. Some kids earn the world by existing. Others. He turned, locked eyes with me across the room and raised his glass. Others just take up space. The quartet kept playing, but the chatter died. Mom smirked and added loud and clear, "Be grateful we still keep a roof over your head, Ebony. Most girls your age would kill for this life." Serenity flipped her hair. Exactly. Some of us don't need to beg for scraps. 40 faces turned to me at once. Phones lowered. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Mrs. Blanca Aguirre, seated quietly near the front in her simple navy dress, met my eyes and gave the tiniest nod. I set my champagne flute on the nearest table. The clink echoed. I walked to the center of the room, heels silent on the marble, and smiled the same smile I'd practiced in the mirror for weeks. "Then let her start paying your salary," I said, voice calm, loud enough for every microphone hidden in the flower arrangements to catch. "Because, Dad, you're fired. Tonight." Dad's glass slipped in his hand. Bourbon splashed across his shoes. Mom's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Serenity actually laughed, short, nervous, waiting for the punchline. I lifted one finger. That was the signal. The lights dimmed without warning. The quartet stopped mid-note. A low, mechanical hum came from the ceiling as the crystal chandelier rose on invisible wires, revealing the hidden projector lens. Garrett Stone stepped out from behind the dessert station in a charcoal suit, remote in hand. He pressed the button. The screen lit up with the first slide, 20 feet wide, in bold black letters on white: Zimmerman Realty Group Employee Termination Notice. Clyde Zimmerman, Chairman Emeritus, effective immediately. Gasps rippled outward like rings in water. Phones came back up, this time recording. Dad stared upward, mouth working soundlessly. Mom grabbed his arm. "What is this? Ebony, turn it off right now." I didn't move. Garrett clicked again. Slide 2, the employment agreement Dad had signed 14 months ago. His own looping signature circled in red. Page 14 highlighted: employee serves at the pleasure of the board and may be terminated without cause upon written notice. Slide 3, board resolution dated the same week, signed by every director, removing Dad from all voting rights. Slide 4, a simple org chart. My name at the top. His name crossed out in red. Serenity shrieked, "This is a joke, right? Turn it off." Garrett ignored her and kept clicking. Garrett pressed the button and the screen blazed with the first line. Garrett's voice cut through the frozen silence, calm, professional, merciless. "Slide 5, he announced. A single page filled the screen. Dad's employment contract, paragraph 17, circled in red. At will employment. Termination without cause or notice. Severance 0. Dad lunged forward. "This is insane. I own slide 6. Garrett continued. A spreadsheet replaced the contract. 38 rows. Dates, amounts, descriptions. $180,400 labeled family educational support. $2,100,000 labeled future heir residence. $412,000 labeled European cultural enrichment. Every line traced from company accounts to personal ones bearing Serenity's name or Mom's maiden name. Guests started whispering. Phones angled higher. Dad's face drained of color. Mom clutched the table edge, knuckles white. Slide 7. A letter on IRS letterhead. Official seal. Case number. Date stamped 8 months earlier. Receipt of Form 211 whistleblower submission. Investigation opened for potential criminal tax fraud, misappropriation of corporate funds, and filing of false returns. Someone in the back actually dropped a glass. It shattered. Garrett did not pause. Slide 8. A simple declaration of trust. Ebony Zimmerman Irrevocable Trust. Dated 14 months ago. Sole settler me. Sole trustee me. Current assets, 100% of Zimmerman Realty Group operating entities, real property holdings and liquid reserves. Dad roared, voice cracking. You can't do this. That company carries my name. Garrett clicked again. Slide 9. A Georgia Secretary of State filing, Articles of Amendment. Company name changed effective 48 hours from tonight. EZ Realty Holdings LLC, all references to Zimmerman removed. Mom finally found her voice. You ungrateful slide 10, Garrett said. Bank of America letterhead. Account closure notices for every corporate card in Dad's wallet and Mom's purse. Effective midnight. Serenity screamed high and sharp. Turn it off. She's lying, this is illegal. Garrett kept going. Slide 11. Photos pulled from public Instagram posts. Serenity on a yacht in Capri. Serenity holding shopping bags on Via Condotti. Each image stamped with the exact corporate charge that paid for it. The room erupted in murmurs. One cousin I hadn't spoken to in years shook his head and mouthed, "Damn." Dad tried to charge the stage. 2 off-duty Atlanta PD officers I'd hired for security stepped in front of him without a word. He stopped short, breathing like a bull. Mom collapsed into a chair, hand over her heart. Serenity kept shrieking, tears streaking mascara down her cheeks. This is my birthday gift? You're ruining everything. I finally spoke. Actually, I said, voice steady. This is my birthday gift to myself. Garrett clicked to the final slide, a single line in massive font. Any questions may be directed to Garrett Stone, Counsel for EZ Realty Holdings. All further communication with former employees will go through him. The screen went black. The lights came up. 40 phones were still recording. Mrs. Blanca Aguirre stood slowly, looked straight at Dad and said in her quiet Spanish-accented English, I watched her build every brick of this company while you watched golf. God sees everything, Senor Clyde. Dad's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. Mom tried to stand, wobbled, sat back down hard. Serenity ran toward me, fists clenched. One of the officers caught her gently by the arm. She dissolved into hysterical sobs against his chest. I walked to the microphone the quartet had been using. Thank you all for coming, I said. Dessert is still being served. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. No one moved. Dad found his voice at last, hoarse and shaking. You'll never get away with this. I looked him in the eye. I already have. Security escorted them out the side door. Mom's heels dragged across the marble. Serenity's crying echoed down the hallway. Dad never looked back. The front doors of the mansion slammed shut behind them just after midnight. The first lien hit 3 weeks after the party. IRS froze every account still carrying the old Zimmerman name. Dad's country club membership bounced. Mom's spa charges declined. The black Amex they both carried turned into plastic bricks overnight. By month 2, the formal notice arrived, $11.4 million in back taxes, penalties, and interest. The Buckhead mansion went on the auction block. Bidding started at $8 million and barely crawled to $9 million. A hedge fund guy from Miami bought it sight unseen. Moving trucks rolled up on a rainy Thursday. Dad stood on the front steps in the same bathrobe he'd worn for 20 years, watching strangers box up his golf trophies. They rented them a 2-bedroom apartment in Sandy Springs. Nothing fancy, beige carpet, no concierge. Mom cried the first night because the dishwasher was loud. Dad stopped shaving. Serenity lost her spot at the Westminster School the day the tuition wire reversed. The headmaster sent a polite letter, unpaid balance, immediate withdrawal required. She enrolled at North Atlanta High, a public school 20 minutes north. On her first day, someone recognized her from the viral clip that now had 14 million views on TikTok. Kids filmed her walking down the hallway whispering, "That's the girl whose sister aired the whole family." They slowed the footage of her crying, added clown music, and set it to loop. The video stayed pinned on the school's anonymous Finsta for weeks. Dad tried the country club one last time, hoping his face would still open doors. The manager met him at the entrance, apologetic but firm. "Membership lapsed, sir. Payment declined." He drove home in the 10-year-old Lexus that used to be the spare car. Mom sold her jewelry at a gray market dealer off Peachtree. She came home with 40